Shalom, family, and thank you so much for joining us for this week's weekly news update. It's always a pleasure and a privilege for me to come and sit with you and join together as we get together on these things. And it's always something that I actually look forward to. Found out it's my son's favorite broadcast, so that's kind of nice to know. Thank you all for a 5x5. So let me know I'm coming in loud and clear out there. For those of you joining us for the first time, we do have quite a few that are finding our channel now, especially for the news broadcast. So we're grateful for that. And whether you're joining us on Facebook or Rumble or here on YouTube, we're certainly glad you did. And we do want to encourage you to share the link, to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Hopefully you have, but if you haven't, and double check that you are subscribed if you subscribed before. And we have found that there's some hinky business going on sometimes over there. And over here, we like to say that we want to be informed without being overwhelmed, something we say every single week. And it's important for us to keep that notion in our mind so that we don't allow the things that are going on, the cares of this world, the deceitfulness of riches, and the lust of other things, as the scripture says, to overwhelm us. And everything we look at from the scriptural point of view. We want to kind of take that 10,000-foot view, right? We want to kind of sit in the heavens, as it says in Ephesians chapter 2. And sit with Mashiach and see things from his perspective. And that way we're able to make sure that we don't start getting too caught up in the cares of this world, the deceitfulness of riches, and the lust of other things. And we do have a website that we use, that we put all of these stories on that we're going to be talking about not only today, but in previous broadcasts as well. And you'll notice there's not a ton of advertising and what have you. So I just encourage you to bookmark that and use that. And as you can see, we've got quite a few stories to cover tonight. So thank you again for sharing, for encouraging our brothers and sisters. It's really important that we take the time to speak shalom into other people so that they're not overwhelmed by the things that are going on. And you become that calm voice in their life. And so as you come together, you go over things, you review them. We're not ignoring them because that would be in a violation of the scripture. We're told to watch, but we don't want to be constantly updated because that, of course, creates anxiety. So this is where we found a really nice balance, and I believe this is going to continue to be a blessing. Certainly has been a berakah for me, and I pray that it has been for all of you as well. And on that note, let's get into the news. The top news story today is a stunner. And this is the very same organization that created this state. So to see the top UN court ruling that Israeli settlements in Palestinian territories violate international law, well, that was a big, huge development. And this just came down. The International Court of Justice has declared Israel's prolonged occupation and settlement policies in Palestinian territories since 1967. So that's a long time, are unlawful and must end swiftly. This non-binding advisory opinion may intensify the legal and diplomatic scrutiny on Israel amid its ongoing conflict with Hamas in Gaza. The United Nations Court ruled Israel's settlements in the West Bank, along with the annexation of East Jerusalem and continued control over certain aspects of the Gaza Strip, violate several international laws and norms, including the Hague Regulations and the Fourth Geneva Convention. So they are warming up for the full purge, and this is going to be quite a situation here as we're watching it unfold. And I just want to remind everybody that it was that very organization, the United Nations, that issued a charter that created this state. So you can't, on the one hand, say the charter authorizes our existence, while at the same time, that same body now is saying you are operating outside of that charter. Okay, so this is really monumental when you really think about it. And yes, I do believe that that is a rendering of judgment. And of course, we know from the scriptures from the book of Revelation that there will be those that the city would have to be overrun by Gentiles. And some people don't really understand that that's already happening and has been happening for some time. And There are mortal enemies of the remnant. So you guys have figured out what's going on here. And of course, anybody who's rejected Mashiach has already been removed. So there's that. So be careful there, my brethren, with some of our sympathies and some of our we sort of give sort of blanket carte blanches to groups, and we got to be really careful with that. We have to look a little closer. And there's a lot of things that are changing as more truth comes out and more information comes to light. And speaking of which, there's some things that are happening right now that are really, really troubling. Look at this. Now, Israel was attacked by Yemen. If you guys remember, we talked about that. That Yemen was, and the Houthi rebels, if you will, were definitely attacking and presenting an aggressive threat. Well, Israeli jets bomb sites in Yemen link to the, and they always make sure they put this in there if you haven't noticed. That's always there, nonstop. Iran backed, always going to say it, keep repeating it and putting it in the narrative. Israeli fighter jets bomb sites in Yemen affiliated with the Iran-backed Houthi militia on Saturday in retaliation for a deadly drone attack in Tel Aviv a day earlier. According to 4 U.S. officials and 2 regional officials, it was the first time Israel had publicly attacked the group in months of escalating tensions. And so, again, we're watching some of this unfold, and it is quite interesting to watch the sort of theatrics because, again, it's not conventional. And didn't I tell you guys, one of the things that we were watching was individuals being held accountable. And so there's a new way in which these things are really being prosecuted. It's not really a new way. I mean, it's not like people weren't personally held responsible in the past. It just seems to be a much more accelerated process now. It's like the events the ink isn't even barely dry. It used to be a long time afterward, and now it's not. So there's something really changing, and I think that that's affecting decision making in these halls of power, if you will. And so things are starting to heat up between superpowers as well. This is something that really does concern us. And of course, the wars and rumors of wars warning we receive from Mashiach obviously come to mind when we see these things. The U.S. is preparing jamming devices targeting Russia, China satellites. Well, they might take that kind of personal, right? The U.S. is about to deploy a new ground-based jammer designed to blunt Chinese or Russian satellites from transmitting information by U.S. forces during a conflict. The Space Force disclosed. Why are they telling each other about their capability? Why would you announce this? Right? Why would you publicly announce that you're going to do something like this? Wouldn't this be something you might keep secret until you absolutely needed it? So this is what I mean by some of this being theatrics and bravado and sort of, well, just in case you guys aren't sure, we're going to release these and you be careful because we can jam your stuff. It's telegraphing a punch. That's exactly right. It doesn't seem natural, nor does it seem logical. There's something about it that seems too obvious. Right? And so, again, that's why I think we're really in theatrics mode. And remember, we have the scripture to help us because it says that all the armies of the earth are arrayed against Mashiach upon arrival. So who are they really preparing to fight? Not really preparing to fight one another, although they will, because, well, what does evil do but fight, right? Create war and conflict and what have you. But there are some things that are quite interesting that are going on. And in China, they seem to be just really cruising along, just enjoying their trajectory in terms of their future. And they have a very optimistic viewpoint. And so this, again, is going to affect world events because as they're marching toward a positive future and some country comes along and says, we're going to sanction you, we're going to slow you down, you're getting in the way of a positive dream. That's going to become a problem. So we're going to watch this continue to escalate. And China is installing the wind and solar equivalent of 5 large nuclear power stations per week. You read that correct. They are installing the wind and solar equivalent of 5 large nuclear power stations per week. That's how fast they're expanding their electrical generation capability and ability to sustain their society. And so this is a commitment that they're making to make sure that their people have adequate power for future technology that is coming down the road. And that's per week, guys. Can you imagine if 5 large nuclear power stations were put up per week somewhere? We'd be like, wow, that's moving at a pretty good pace. Well, they're doing the same thing with wind and solar power. In short, China is installing a record amount of solar and wind while scaling back once ambitious plans for nuclear. So they found a safer, easier way to generate the same amount of power, and they've just decided to double down on that. And there's, of course, other countries that are still trying to figure out the way to conquer this. But again, some of it you have to wonder, is there a motivation really to provide power? As I think in some places they're more sincere. In other places, I think they utilize control over power for obvious reasons, to control populations and to dictate things that otherwise wouldn't be dictated if you were independently powered. So it's really interesting to watch this. I think this is going to continue to be an area of grave concern. And I think that all of you, I pray all of you are looking into alternatives and ways to supply power into your camps, your homes, your retreats, wherever it is that Elohim has you throughout the earth, wherever the remnant are. And there are definite signs of continued conflict increasing. So we're seeing more saber rattling, and we knew this was coming. We saw it rattling up. We saw it ratcheting up, but we keep an eye on it just so that we're not overwhelmed by it. North Korean leader meets with a Russian military delegation. We've already heard about this last week, how that they're basically starting to cooperate. The need for military cooperation between the Democratic People's Republic of Korea and Russia for purposes of supporting mutual security was discussed. And so there's a strong possibility that we're going to see action on the Korean peninsula, along with the action that might be going on in Taiwan, if that's coordinated, along with actions against NATO. This could get interesting really quickly. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un met with Russian military delegation headed by Deputy Defense Minister Alexei Krivoruko, the Korean Central News Agency said. According to the news agency, the need for military cooperation between the Democratic People's Republic of Korea and the Russian Federation for the purpose of supporting mutual security interests was discussed at the meeting. The KCNA noted that Russian President Vladimir Putin conveyed his warm greetings. So you see, they've really united a lot more in the face of a common enemy. So this is Machiavelli's technique being used against the United States. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. And it's starting to manifest against the West. So this is an interesting thing to watch unfold. And normally, we normally see war by now. So it must be that these are equal forces and they're concerned about that, right? Meanwhile, I think they're trying to convince the people to continue to keep this fear atmosphere going, especially economically, so that they can bring in what the Bible already predicted we would see. And here we continue to see more indicators that we're moving closer and closer to these fulfillments. And the UK government is introducing a new digital identity system. And this seems to be going around the world in various forms, where they're trying desperately to tie every person to technology in one way, shape, or form. The UK government has signaled to introduce a new digital verification system, which holds the potential to revolutionize the way we interact with digital services and data. You see this? You see statements like this: revolutionize, completely revamp, change the whole thing, right? Well, what do you think they're doing? They're getting you ready for what the scripture already foretold. Okay, remember that only those who have been trained to overcome the power of mammon will pass the test. Most people will fail because they do not have dominion over mammon. Mammon has dominion over them. No matter how much they say, t-shirts they wear, hats they wear, how much remnant ease they learn, makes no difference. At the end of the day, when the test comes, when it really comes down to rubber meeting the road, you're going to see how few the remnant really are. And speaking of which, there's going to be capitulations, kind of like this guy. And I got to tell you, some of this information coming out about the Biden resignation, that he's no longer going to be running for president, is really looking pretty sad. There's a hidden message in Biden's humiliating withdrawal letter that should terrify every American. Who on earth is really running the country, right? So He basically wrote a letter. If you want to go back and read all about that, what you're going to find out is that it was pretty embarrassing. And frankly, it does open up questions as to who, in fact, really is running the country. So while there's got to be the most serious things happening in the world, we have utter buffoonery being put in front of us. And you know that's intentional, folks. So you're just too smart and too sharp. There's no way you're going to be fooled by this, but it is quite comical. So that we can overcome it. And I got news for you. Those of you that are still in love with your independence, any of you that are thinking that you can get by through this time period without being with your brethren, just waving at one another across 3 or 4 miles won't work. You will literally need one another before this is over. You won't survive. You will not endure to the end without your brethren. There's some odd activity at Chinese submarine shipyards that are drawing interest. The sudden appearance of 4 crane barges where a submarine had been parked is prompting questions about the possibility of an accident. So they're getting ready, and there's things happening. And by the way, more people die during accidents in military exercises than they actually do during conflicts. And so there was a submarine there. There's some questions about that. And frankly, there's a lot of attention going on to military movement. What this indicates to me, the fact that they have an article about it and they're watching this closely, tells you how nervous everyone is about the latest movements, right? So what does this do? This puts people on a hair trigger. That's not a very good atmosphere for the military. So again, this is why we encourage everybody prayerfully to be reviewing where you are and making sure that you are where you're supposed to be. As a matter of fact, even Trump is warning that there's war like no other brewing. A war like no other. Okay? War like no other is brewing. And he said that in his RNC speech, speaking of the international crisis. And again, if these things pop off at the same time, then he's correct. It will be a war like no other. And there won't be a safe neighborhood, if you will, in Babylon, in Egypt. It will all disintegrate quickly. Former President Donald Trump warned that the planet is on the brink of World War III in his Republican National Convention speech Thursday. Then there is an intense international crisis, the likes of which the world has seldom been part of, the GOP nominee said in his remarks in Fiserv Forum. War is now raging in Europe and the Middle East. A growing specter of conflict hangs over Taiwan, Korea, and the Philippines, and all of Asia, and our planet is teetering on the edge of World War III. I don't think that's a flippant statement. I believe that he's speaking the truth. I do believe that part of this is theatrics, so that, they can bring in peace right before, there's just utter disaster, and, get to the edge of disaster and pull back. And right on the edge of disaster, people find the will to change and all this stuff, right? It's very Masonic. It's very man, 666. Man is elevating himself to the point where he doesn't need any divine help. He himself is pulling himself out of his own behavior, if you will. He's his own Elohim. And that's what 666 really is representing. Man divining himself, believing so much in his own opinion. This is what you guys are running into out there as you're trying to share the truth and love with people. And so this is why you're going to keep seeing signs in the heavens and things manifesting in the earth, because the king is coming. The confrontation is almost over. And so don't be deceived. For if it were possible, they would deceive even the very elect. The sun is blasting out second X-class flare this week, which might be used as an excuse. If you guys haven't noticed, there's a whole lot of disruptions going on. Told you it would be interesting for them to actually pull this off. So the sun is blasting out a second X-class flare this week, triggers more radio blackouts. And sometimes I wonder if this isn't used just to give them plausible deniability for certain systems to be taken down. Solar flares are, of course, powerful, and they're using those as cover story, in my opinion. So I've been suspicious of some of this for some time, and my suspicions have not been assuaged to satisfaction just yet. I wanted to share something with you with regard to the Donald Trump story. Let me get this graphic up on the screen. This was Donald Trump's own words. So it's not something somebody wrote about him, something he posted himself. And he says, speaking of his conversation with President Zelensky, and he says that he's, of course, condemned some of the things that have gone out. And he says, I appreciate President Zelensky for reaching out because I, as your next president of the United States, will bring peace to the world. I will bring peace to the world. Did you see that? Okay. So I do think that there's legitimate reason to be concerned about what you're observing right now. And I think you're watching a lot of it come to pass. But these signs in the heavens are happening right in front of our faces, speaking of the solar blast and things like that. And these are Earth's, confirmations, right? As a matter of fact, in New York, this was an interesting story. Giant fireball meteor whizzes over the Statue of Liberty as residents report feeling a shaking and hearing a boom. And 34,000 mile per hour meteor blasted past the Statue of Liberty in New York Harbor on Tuesday, incinerating itself above the city. And so this was kind of an interesting thing. I don't know if they have video of it. I did see a video of it on, I think, what do you call it? BitChute. So I'd encourage you to go look there. And if we can find it, we'll post it on Remnant Watch. I thought there was a video in here, but there apparently is not. But I thought it was interesting because, again, another one of those signs in the heavens things, right? Because he told us there would be signs in the heavens, and it would cause men to be perplexed on the earth because they don't quite know what to make of them. And if you ever watch some of these videos where people are posting about some of the things they're seeing in the heavens that are just unexplained, the reaction is always the same. Like they're freaking out. They're like, I don't know, like, what is that? What is that? Oh my goodness, and they're swearing. It's terrible, right? They have no idea how to repent. They have no idea how to do anything, right? So it is literally Book of Revelation stuff happening right in front of you. Speaking of which, Mashiach warned us that we would see many, many earthquakes. And sure enough, we just saw another one, a 7.4 magnitude, and it hit Chile, which, by the way, remember, they downgraded this scale. So that might be 7.7, 7.8, might be an 8.0. No injuries or damages were reported, but it was a massive earthquake of 7.4 magnitude. And to Antofagasta in Chile, the United States Geological Survey said, and no immediate damage or injuries were reported. The quake struck near San Pedro de Atacama in Thursday, and adding a tremor hit 41 kilometers southeast of the town. And so we're seeing more activity. We've been reporting a lot more about earthquakes. And our concern, of course, is the area. There are certain key areas in the United States that are in danger zones. One of them I think of as the Cascadian subduction zone, which is just off of the coast in the northwest corner of the United States. I've been concerned about that for a while. And now there's more and more rumbling in the earth. And so a lot more earthquake activity on the West Coast. So something to be aware of. And again, definitely being prayerfully aware of. And there's other areas of the country as well. So you have, for example, Oklahoma is suddenly experiencing, and just east of Oklahoma is experiencing more and more tremor activity, which could forebode a new fault line that may start to become more and more active. And there's actually several that could come into play. So that's interesting. And we're just seeing the earth reacting, which is, as we talked about before, the earth vomits out its inhabitants. And an Illinois town, for example, is being told that to flee imminent dam failure, which is really a huge deal. Thunderstorms with heavy rains and possible tornadoes rattled the Chicago area and elsewhere in the Midwest, leaving a dam near failure on Tuesday in southern Illinois, cutting power to hundreds of thousands and even sending water forecasters scrambling for safety. So this is a huge deal. And they, of course, did have some tornado activity that was exacerbating this. But nevertheless, again, it seems like all the time we keep seeing more and more information about increasing power in the storms. The storms are no longer the smaller storms. They seem to all be catastrophic. Look at this. Derecho, right? Derecho, tornadoes, flooding, wreak havoc from south to northeast. And floodwaters were reportedly entering homes and businesses. At least one nursing home was also evacuated, according to local reports. A flash flood emergency, and this is all going on in the Ozark Mountains, 20 miles south of Mountain Home, and it was in Marion County, Georgia, I believe. So there's all kinds of areas that are being affected by, look at this. It's crazy. The roots of the large tree are seen in, this is in Illinois. So maybe it was Marion County, Illinois. Forgive me. And so, you're seeing, ooh, look at that. Church steeple on the roof was severely damaged. It just got ripped off. Whoo! Judgment is falling. There's some serious things happening, saints, that are really concerning. And it seems to be it's like ratcheting up. Just ratchet. Every time we look, we seem to be seeing more and more like hints, right? I mean, it's getting severe. In California, of course, like I said, the West Coast is of grave concern. In California, unprecedented land movement of about a foot per week. Am I reading that right? Yeah, a foot per week. This is unprecedented land movement, right? Breaking gas lines, cracking roads, and causing homes to sink. Unprecedented stuff going on. And this is everywhere. I mean, I know we're looking at California here, but this is happening in a lot of places. What in the world has been happening in Rancho Palo Verdes? When I heard the land was moving there, it was immediately got my attention because I've been warning the geological instability along California coast for more than a decade. So again, and there have been a lot of voices that have been warning for some time that just adding a bunch more people with the weather changes and with everything that's been going on isn't necessarily wise. And then of course the weather shifts. So we go from really, really dry to where all the aquifers are dried out, everything is dried out, the earth is dry, and then boom, they get a ton of water. That all gets filled in. You keep doing that. Those are extremes. That's like big extremes, and that's going to have impact eventually. And so we do have concern for our brethren on the West Coast. If you are on the West Coast, well, we love you, and be safe, and pray and ask Elohim. If you're in a good spot, good, then stay there. And if you're not, well, then you get moving. It's that simple, right? Amen and amen. There are other concerns as well. There's one of the things that we have been hearing about is continued pestilence. This is also the warning that we were given by Mashiach, right? So we shouldn't be surprised when we see news like this where new fungal infections are discovered. Here's one in China. Scientists uncovered a species of fungi that had never been seen in humans. They say warmer temperatures could drive its evolution for the worse. And so now they're warning of it. Does it seem like they're always looking for something for us to be scared of? But anyway, scientists in China have discovered a previously unknown fungal pathogen that can infect humans. The fungus, called whatever that is, was found in clinical samples from 2 unconnected hospital patients. In experiments, the researchers found that the yeast was resistant to several first-line antifungal drugs at higher temperatures. Who wants to guess that they may be actually trying to create that for other reasons? It's resistant to antifungal remedies, right? So, who would be interested in that, I wonder? Again, this world is getting more and more dangerous, and that's why Mashiach warned us. He warned us. And speaking of getting dangerous, one of the areas that it's getting very dangerous is technical, because we rely on this technology in ways that we don't realize until it affects your life. Like when power goes out in an area, people just think residential, right? They just think about houses. They don't think about gas pumps. They don't think about emergency services. They don't think about water that is pumping for fire, or for putting out fires. So these are all things that are affected by technology today that used to be done analog, right? They used to be offline, and so one wouldn't affect the other. Not anymore. Now we have cascading effect. So what did we see just this last week, folks? something that I've been warning about for some time. And I just share this with you all because you're pretty sharp people. You know better than to think that we can rely on. I don't know how they think they're going to run their New World Order with this tech that falls apart. I keep saying this. Stuff fails a lot. Okay, I've been putting systems together since the 90s, and I'm going to tell you right now, it's a never-ending patch, never-ending security updates, never-ending, never-ending. And here, global Microsoft's CrowdStrike IT outage caused one of the biggest hospital chains in America to cancel all elective surgeries. Did you see that? And procedures and visits amid chaos. So Mass General Brigham, one of the biggest healthcare systems in America, has axed all non-urgent visits, procedures, and surgeries amid a global IT failure. So you see how this can affect you in ways you didn't even think about, okay? And so they wanted us to be on digital so that they could control this, so they could create this chaos, because there are those who believe that they want to bring something out of chaos, right? They want to bring it out of chaos. So they have to be able to create chaos in order to bring it out of chaos. Are you following along? Are you catching that? Are you catching the theme? Run on over to Remnant Watch. You can read the whole story. But I just encourage you to be aware that this is not accidental. This was all set up. We were set up from the get up for decades, for a long time. Okay. And it created exactly. Funny how the same word keeps being used too, right, guys? We watch these narratives, right? And this is being put into the mind psychologically. It's like saying the word touch your shoulder. Say the word touch your shoulder. Why? Because they're programming you. They're programming you to respond to this, okay? Global tech chaos. They keep saying the word chaos. Computer says no. Written boarding passes. Blue screens of death and checkout chaos. World reacts to being in dark ages after a tech outage. And so an abundance of blue screens and supermarket chaos, aviation anarchy being seen all across the globe after a major tech outage, right? So this is what we just experienced. And people were getting at the checkout, getting the blue screen of death, which of course, if it's on your PC at home, you just reboot, right? No big deal. You just tell, you got to turn the computer on. Hopefully you save something before that happened, right? But if you didn't, or if you're at a network, you know that these people are sitting there going, what? So what? Right? They better have an IT guy there fixing that. And of course, this I had actually a family member that used to work in there, and I tell you, they lose money by the second when their systems go down. And so basically, I'm not even sure that they know whether or not it was just a technical glitch or if it was caused by a nefarious power. But if you were an enemy of the United States in preparation for going to war and want to throw the people of the United States into chaos, didn't they just show you how? I think they did. And again, I keep an eye on consistency of word use. And so when we see consistency of word use, like the word global chaos with planes and trains and grounded GPS and mayhem, shops closed. Mayhem's another word that basically means the same thing, right? Football tickets and canceled. This is what they want to create. So they're basically signaling to create mayhem. And the most serious IT outage the world has ever seen sparked global chaos today, with planes and trains halted and NHS disrupted, shops closed, football teams unable to sell tickets, and banks and TV channels knocked offline. Dun, dun, dun. So these are all tests, folks. This is a test to see how much the system, what happens when we turn this off, what happens when we turn this off, what is the effect on society. They ran a test on social media earlier in the year, as you all recall, and they tested to see what the reactions would be. And they saw how people reacted, and it wasn't good. The level of attachment that people have to their technology is seriously unhealthy. And now they're talking about it not being an easy thing to remedy, even though they were able to patch it back together. CrowdStrike's glitch could take weeks to fix after a system failure. Double whammy. A widespread Microsoft outage disrupted flights, banks, media outlets, and companies around the world. And the ongoing IT outage has struck dozens of companies around the world and could actually take weeks to fix, according to an expert. Okay, so two separate problems have struck at the same time, with issues hitting Microsoft's 365 services and an update from an anti-malware called a product CrowdStrike that is pushing computers into a blue screen of death, the BSOD. Couldn't, as far as I'm concerned, it couldn't have happened to a better company, but I digress, right? Unfortunately, this is again one of the areas where you don't know what it's going to affect till after it affects it. Kind of like this. You don't know that the nation's 9/11 system is going to be on the brink of its own emergency as some of these things fall apart. Just after lunchtime on June 18, Massachusetts leader discovered the statewide 9/11 system was down. A scramble to handle the crisis was on. Police texted out administrative numbers to callers could use. Boston Mayor Michelle Wu gave outage updates at a press conference, outlined for plans. Look what they have to do to cover this, right? And this is just a small outage. This is one area where 9/11 went down. And what does it do? Why do they have to run? Why do they have to rush? Because criminal elements in every city are only waiting for the lights to go out. The moment they know that no one's coming, the moment they know that you are unprotected, many soft targets will be hit. Targets that are already been cased, people that were already on a list. And as soon as they know that there's not going to be any repercussions for their actions, or the likelihood, think about it, if power's out, are there videotapes? Are there cameras? That means all the cameras are out. Security systems are down. Lots of things start happening when people figure that out. So that's why the 9/11 system is so important, because even just the threat of calling 9/11 and that the police would show up in a few minutes is enough deterrent for many criminals. But if they know for a fact that that system is down and that becomes known in the public, this puts at risk not only life and limb, but property and operations and businesses and so forth. And with the economy being as tight and difficult as it is, this is something that I don't see them taking very lightly at all. Okay. And so this is, and like I said, we have other things that are causing disruption and causing us to be upset. And by the way, that's coming from both sides. So when you see things like this, where you get controversial events, Secret Service continue to face questions as FBI investigates Trump's shooter and so forth, and you're going back and forth and all this, the vacillating and the going back and forth and the constant debating and discussions that you're logging into and sitting through are not healthy, because they are basically, you might have been fine with the matter, but because you're watching people like a ping pong match go back and forth, you went from fine with the matter to vacillating. They did it. They resonated you into this, into double-mindedness. And what happens when you're double-minded? In every way, they want you to be used to that. They want you to get used to not being certain, to being unsure, to making to not be making decisions with confidence, without verified information. They want you constantly wondering, what's the truth? What's right? So that's why they want you thrown in debate. It is called, according to the scripture in Ephesians chapter 4, it is called being tossed to and fro. That's what it's called. And so this is what they're doing with these narratives. Okay. And so this is why you're seeing things like this coming out, where, you know, the Trump rally gunman is spotted by law enforcement nearly 30 minutes before shots fired, sources say. And it's now becoming a mental puzzle. And gee, let's figure out the facts here. And gosh, why was he walking around 30 minutes before? And boy, what's really going on here? See what they're doing? They're sucking you into a story that's really irrelevant. Doesn't even matter. It's not relevant to your life at all. Somebody's business, but it's not your business. And this is where they get people overwhelmed on nonsense. And the next thing you know, you got frayed nerves and people making really dumb decisions and ruining their own families, which is what they really want. Okay, next thing you got a husband and wife fighting over nonsense, things that don't even affect them. And that stress level gets high enough, which again is their intention, then they can implement the solutions where you just simply get rid of yourself, right? So, hey, look at this, guys. If it gets too much for you, well, the first suicide pod used soon in Switzerland, according to campaigners. So an assisted dying group expects a portable suicide pod to be used for the first time in Switzerland, potentially within months, providing death without medical supervision, it said on Wednesday. I am just truly aghast at some of the things that I have to. Do you understand why it is we don't want to look at this stuff all the time? Because they do it on purpose. It's almost like the Satanists. They want you to find their crime scenes because they want to torture you and leave those crime scenes in your mind, those investigators and everybody else, for the rest of your lives. They do it on purpose, and they know, and they're playing serious psychological games with people that open up doorways for demons. And so be really careful with some of this stuff. And again, where's that chaos going to manifest? Well, if you think it's not going to manifest in literally the root of all evil, well, you missed the point of the whole mark of the beast. Okay, the greatest bubble in human history is close to bursting, according to Black Swan investor Mike Spitznagel. I don't know who that is, but okay. Mark Spitznagel, a bearish investor, predicts stocks may soon lose over half their value in a sell-off. And I do think that we're watching some type of artificial inflation of the stock market as a way of trying to stabilize the mental state of the country while they did some of the things that we're doing. But that really seems to be, again, another shell game, house of cards. And so it is really falling apart. And I do believe that we're going to be seeing some major changes here soon. So this is why, especially as we move toward an election, we may not even have that. I don't even know. It's looking pretty weird. So, hang on to your hat, folks. We may be seeing the wildest ride we've ever seen through what should be an election year, right? And as a matter of fact, speaking of wild rides, I told you guys we're watching the increase of demonic activity, right? And we continue to see activity like this. Now, this is not the first time we've reported this type of evil, and I want to just state right now, viewer discretion is advised for this next story because it is a very difficult story to review. And again, we've seen more than one of these, and this is what demons do when they get into people. Pardon again the expletive. A horrific video shows a moment a woman shoots an infant in Philly. This is a chilling video. I'm not going to play it. You're welcome to go look at it on our site, and it's there at Remnant Watch. You can go look at it, but the chilling video footage shows the moment a woman shot a 7-month-old infant in Philadelphia, heartlessly shouting the expletive as the child's mother screamed in horror. Okay, you don't do stuff like this without serious demonic infestation. This is pure demonic activity. And so this is very dangerous. And again, what we've been watching from this point of view, from our point of view, as we watch the scripture unfold, is we've been watching more and more horrific acts of violence that are inspired by demons or by demonic spirits that are so heavily influencing one member or another that it causes the destruction of the family. So if you're not sure what the demons are after, they're always, always, always attacking your family. Okay? So remember that. And this is why it is so important for us to preserve family and not allow ourselves to be diverted. And our enemy comes in with division, tries to create all kinds of double-mindedness so that you receive nothing of Elohim. And get people to reach a point where they go sit in one of those chairs and call it quits, right? Isn't that really what they're after? Okay. And here's another example of that. Another very sad story indicating the level of demonic activity operating in the nation. Alabama father shoots dead his wife and 4 children under the age of 10 at pastor's home after kid's birthday party as family reveal heartbreaking final hours. Terrible news. A father allegedly shot dead his wife, their 2 kids, and his young niece and nephew an hour after one of the children's birthday parties. Literally an hour after one of these, okay? Brandon Allen Kenrick, 32, faces 5 counts of capital murder after the mass shooting at his pastor's grandfather Allen's property in rural Alabama. Unbelievable, okay? This is incredibly sad. All 5 were shot in the head and found dead at the scene, other than Haley, who had been still breathing and rushed to the hospital but did not survive. So Any questions about the demonic that is loosed? I warned you all for years that they would find out their rebuker doesn't work. Right there in a pastor's house, their rebuker doesn't work. And they're finding out that evil just walked right in. So this is very, very serious. We are in a dangerous, dangerous time. And when a shooter at a presidential candidate can run a drone over a venue for hours before he attempts an assassination, how many know that we're living in a different, like, crazy time? Okay, I mean, the very fact that this even happened goes to show you just how much things have gotten, how fast we've deteriorated. And so just because they can put someone on TV and it looks like everything's normal doesn't mean it is. There's a lot going on right now. One of the things that I believe is causing some of this is technology. You know, one of the challenges that we found with our youngster is the more technology he was exposed to, the more irritable and difficult he was to cooperate with. He was difficult to talk to. And if you interrupted his technology, many times we got a very unhealthy response. As a result, we discontinued the use of that technology and we got our child back. But not everybody has figured that out. And some people are finding out the hard way that this stuff is very dangerous because of the way it makes you behave. This next story, again, and this is why we warn parents, be really careful with this tech and the stuff that the world is pushing. A 12-year-old girl is accused of smothering her 8-year-old cousin over an iPhone. A 12-year-old girl has been charged with murder. She killed her, accused of smothering her 8-year-old cousin as the young girl slept. And so this was over an iPhone. A security camera recorded the killing inside the bedroom they shared on July 15th in Humboldt, Tennessee, a county prosecutor said. The recording shows the older child being bedding to suffocating her cousin as the younger girl slept in the top bunk. It's just amazing the level of calm demonic wickedness that is coming into some people. And I do believe that they used the technology as a gateway, and this created a trigger. And that trigger was a serious trigger. And so efforts to try to turn this around may be too little too late. As a matter of fact, you guys remember we reported that the state of Louisiana was turning this around with, putting the 10 Commandments in the school. Maybe too little too late. As a matter of fact, a federal judge delays the posting of the 10 Commandments in Louisiana public schools. The judge pushed enactment of law to display religious code until November in response to a parent's suit. And so they blocked it in Louisiana from posting the 10 Commandments in public schools until November after the parents from 5 districts sued the state over the law. And so we knew this was going to happen. Like, this was obvious that they were going to see some pushback, but it didn't take long. And so here we go. And I think a lot of people I think a lot of side effects are also happening as a result of this technology that people didn't realize. So they're going to call this a viral threat. I'm not so sure. And they're trying to blame it on some virus, a viral threat. Boy, 14, dies from a brain swelling Nipah virus as officials issue alert over priority pathogen with pandemic potential. And of course, they're always looking for the next one. Boy went into cardiac arrest in the southern Indian state after contracting the bug, which can be lethal brain swelling fever. My suspicion is, are these cell phones, can they do the same thing? Can they have basically the same effect in swelling the brain? And there is some indication that it may be true. So we don't really know what we're looking at, but we do know that we're seeing some serious, serious effects going on in the earth. And so something for us to be aware of. And we seem to continuously see those that were predators, those that were involved in abusing the most innocent of us all, continues to be in the news. It seems like there's always something in the cycle saying this is getting exposed, these are getting caught. So I do believe that Elohim is hearing your prayers. to expose the dark forces and expose the dark places. But please continue to pray for all children in any form of abuse, abduction, harm in any way. Continue to lift them up and pray for them that lights would come on in dark places and all their hiding places would be exposed. Amen and amen. And so I think it's because of your prayers that we're getting these kinds of reports. Disney Cartoon Network Nickelodeon creator Kyle Carosa was charged with possession of child porn. And this is who created the series Mighty Magiswords for Cartoon Network. He's been arrested and charged for possession of child pornography. Okay, that's about as wicked as you get, folks. All right. And these are guys hanging out with children, trying to influence children. Their spirits are in a lot of the spirits going through them are what they're using to create content. So this is what makes it even more damaging. The arrest was made after police served a search warrant on his home. Police records say that the TV animator was found with porn images and charges on account possessing between 12 and 600 images of child porn. Okay. So that's like finding 600 babies underneath a building. There shouldn't be one, much less 600. So again, we're seeing the light come on. Continue to pray. Continue to speak life over people out there, and so that there's all these spirits of death trying to bring death, especially to children, would fail. And you are the ambassadors of light and life. So please pray for the little ones who need our help. And there is judgment falling on various places. And I thought this was an interesting story. A fire breaks out in the First Baptist Church of Dallas. And boy, Texas is really continuing to be in the news for a variety of reasons. This was a mega church, another mega church getting a problem. Initially, 40 Dallas firefighter rescue units responded. Did that say 40? Wow. And so, yeah, that burned down. And you can read more about it. But essentially, this is a big, big, big church, 16,000 members. Okay. And so these things keep happening. It's kind of interesting how these judgments are falling in one way or another, which is, again, like I said, really interesting. Getting back to that smartphone technology, I'm going to finish up with this story. And again, this is good to read because I think that it's really amazing to see how far they've come with some of this programming and some of this mind control. I don't know any other way to call it, guys. I don't know what you would call it, but that's what I see. And so what's happening is there's a major pushback, and I'm really glad to see this. And again, keep praying for eyes to open, for parents to wake up. And a growing number of parents apparently are, because they're refusing to give their children smartphones. And how many right now want to say, all right, file this under, it's about time. Okay, that's what I'd file this under. There's no way you're putting a smartphone in my son's hands. A UK-based organization supporting parents who are not giving their children smartphones was founded in February and has expanded internationally to the United States, Canada, and more. The popularity of the movement is driven by research showing the link between mental health issues in children and smartphone and social media use. Agreed. Well, that's really smart parents who are protecting their children. The mass migration into phone-based childhood has been really harmful to young people. And so you're seeing young people with that blue-eyed stare, and this is that blue light. It's hitting their face. This is actually bad for their retina, bad for their eyesight, bad for their sleep. So if you have a child that already has ADHD or other disturbing things and you're giving them blue light, you're making it worse. All right. And so I don't know a real good reason for these children to be walking around or exposed to the things that are on the internet. Not only that, but you're also opening communication with your child that you don't vet. And I can't even begin to tell you how dangerous that is. I think we've seen enough information on predators and on the kinds of activity that is going on because of the rise of the demonic that we all are, I hope, wise enough to know that you really shouldn't tempt Elohim by putting your children in that kind of harm's way. And so while I can understand why people would want to have technology for certain benefits, it is incredibly dangerous. And so let us all redouble our efforts to protect our youngest and most vulnerable. This is our great mission. He said, suffer the children to come unto me, for of such is the kingdom of Elohim, right? And so we have to be a people that know how to do that, know how to preserve and protect the littlest of them among us, so we can be found faithful to finish well. Well, that's tonight's broadcast. I pray this has been a blessing to you. Tonight's report is brought to you by the members of Remnant House and those that stand with this house. You'll notice there's no bunch of pop-ups and advertising. We're not selling a bunch of things, because the members of this house make this broadcast possible. And Mindy and I and all the members of the house do thank you who have been faithful to help support this work. Thank you again for joining us. May Elohim bless each and every one of you. Good night.